kwa mradi hewa wa Kuku Dar. Zaidi ya watu 50,000 50,000 kutoka mikoa mbalimbali wachangishwa fedha kwa ahadi ya kujengewa mabanda, kupewa vifaranga 1,000, vyakula na dawa za mifugo. Lakini hakuna walichoambulia. Waandamana kutinga kwa DC, kampuni inayolalamikwa yazungumza.
So waliahidiwa watapewa kuku 1,000, vifaranga 1,000 na wajengewe nyumba na wapatiwe kila kitu. Kama uko na hiyo pesa yenye unatoa, si uende tu ujenge hizo vitu na uanze biashara yako. Hapo watajua huu ni mchezo wa town. Huu ni mchezo wa town.
Ni ile tu ya haya si maneno mageni jijini.
Hapa ni jijini ba. So yes, those are the dailies across the region. We'll be back to take a look at the local dailies in depth.
Yes.
But for now, let's focus on the weather outlook for the day. Today being a Friday, it's been a rather wet week. So we start off with this is Turkana.
The north parts. So you'll realize we'll be taking a look at different parts of the country, the north, central, and west Tuko.
It's quite hot, 24 degrees Celsius as early as this.
Right now.
And it promises to be a very sunny day. Highs of 34 degrees Celsius. No cloud cover at all today. Hakuna chance of rain leo.
Clear blue skies.
In ile proper clear blue skies Turkana. Jua inawaka proper. So if you're in Turkana, that's the kind of weather you should expect. Let's cross over to parts of Nyanza, Migori.
It's going to be raining maybe in the evening huko chini, but today it's also going to be clear blue skies in Migori. It might be cloudy in the evening, and because we're not going to be with you over the weekend, let's take a look at over the weekend. 31 as Saturday, 28. These are days that I say if you're planning something and you're in Migori, this is some good weather for you.
All right.
In Tharaka Nithi, the central part of the country, it's chilly right now. It's a little bit wet, 50% precipitation, but it promises to get sunny during the day up to midday, and then after that, manyunyu itaendelea. Over the weekend, it might just be raining over on Sunday.
Okay.
To the coast region, in Lamu, it's 27, but they say it feels like 31 degrees.
This is a 6:15.
Yes.
It feels like 31 degrees Celsius.
Hey. Hiyo ni holiday weather ingine.
Hey, that's a holiday weather. Now this is torture.
Hey. And it's going to, remain the same during the day. 31 actually going to be constant up to from 10 a.m. onwards. Finally, let's take a look at Nairobi. They say the city under the sun. Is it going to be like that? It's going to be like that from midday onwards. But before that, do expect quite a cloudy mid-morning today. Chances of raining, let's take a look at the precipitation. 0.8 millimeters. This goes to show how it's going to be kidogo tu.
It's a fairly chilly day, highs of 23 degrees Celsius in the city.
Over the weekend, it just might be raining on Sunday, so be wary of that. If unapanga kaharusi, inakogele season ya harusi, unaona a number of limousines across...
tomorrow promises to be sunny.
Yes.
Saturday, so kama harusi yako iko kesho, uko sawa.
Uko sawa.
Hata ikinyesha ni baraka.
Let's take a look at the news diary and what to expect. So first off, the campaign secretariat of Raila Odinga will today be hosting a series of events in Addis Ababa, that is in Ethiopia, to formally unveil him to the continent as the candidate for the chairmanship position of the Africa Union Commission. And we do expect that President William Ruto will be in attendance in this event. Today marks day 5 of the KCSE, Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education exams, that for the theory papers today, going to be having the chemistry practicals, that is paper 3. Also, something else to expect today, the basic education principal secretary, that is Dr. Belio Kipsang, will today be supervising the distribution of the KCSE 2024 examination materials at the Kikuyu Town Container. This event is expected to begin at 7 a.m., about 45 minutes from now. Remember, we're going to be giving you some wall-to-wall coverage on how the KCSE exams are continuing in different parts of the country. In Ruiru, I think it was yesterday, yesterday or the day before, they nabbed 2 students with a phone, and it was the DCI who did this. So people are wondering, there's so many crimes around the country, then DCI went for that.
They have their moments. They have their moments.
Well, and because it's a Feel Good Friday, we'll definitely also take a look at some lifestyle kind of events internationally as well. They say the Recording Academy will today be announcing the official names of the 2025 Grammys in USA. Africans will be waiting to see who makes it for the category of the Best Africa Performance. Remember, this category began for the first time last year, when they nominated a number of people, Africans really, and Aria was the one who took that. So going to be waiting to see all that. That is just a nutshell of what to expect in our subsequent bulletins. Right now though, tuingie kwenye magazetini.
Gazeti ni kama imeona better days. Ile jani ili take ndio ifike hapa kwa studio.
Definitely, it's a wet season, but then kudos to mwenye analeta.
Ame struggle lakini imefika. This is a star. History as Safaricom makes 37 billion shillings profit. Telco now the most profitable company in East and Central Africa. So Ethiopia subscribers increase, M-Pesa rules in Kenya, Safaricom's big revenue. Then stories on page 8. If I could just tell you the half-year results. Safaricom Group net profit up by 21% to 36.7 billion. Group service revenue up 12% to 179 billion. M-Pesa revenue up 16% to 77 billion. Group voice revenue 4.5% up to 40.8 billion. Mobile data revenue up 21% to 37.5 billion. Messaging revenue up 8% to 6.2 billion. Watu watumi SMS siku hizi lakini na make profit. Ethiopia subscribers 52 million. Wow. Congratulations to Safaricom. It is the most profitable company in East and Central Africa, and they have the image there of Safaricom CEO Peter Ndegwa on the front page. Other quick highlights on the front page of this paper. Abductors still holding 29 Kenyans, but police say, COCC, that's according to the IG of police, Douglas Kanja. Amesema yes, kuna watu wamedisappear, like 29 of them, they're being held by abductors, but sio polisi. So how did he know that? Anyway. Elsewhere, Kalonzo team deal with Rigathi in the offing, new alliance set for next year. So Rigathi Gachagua, who was impeached, could just get into a political deal with Kalonzo Musyoka's team. And managing pollution, lesser mealworm, scientists discover worms that reduce menace of plastic waste. Now, this is quite a heavy paper because of the Siasa pullout. Yes. And the big story there is upcoming cabinet choices, the new headache for Ruto. We talked about this earlier in the week, that there's still now vacancies within his cabinet that need to be filled. Na kuna watu wengi sana wataka kazi. And it was on the cartoon, one of the cartoons yesterday, showing how it's going to be a very hot seat on who takes particularly the interior docket. Exactly. Also on Siasa, Raila takes AUC chairman campaigns to Addis and diplomats. That's the front page of the Star today. On People Daily, they have a photo of Vice President of the USA, Kamala Harris. They say how Trump victory will affect you as a common mwananchi ukiwa pale pahali uko. As Kamala concedes, saying she was proud of the race, Team Ren, and the way they did it. And they love the kind of democracy they have. Making a phone call to Trump and telling him, good stuff, manze. Good stuff, you won, nimekubali. And Joe Biden, who is the US president, saying, nitembelee hapa White House kidogo pia, before uapishwe, nitembelee nikuonyeshe around. Najua, you've been here before. Tumefanya renovations. Tumefanya renovations kidogo, so unaweza kuwa umesahau pahali some things are. So yes, it's an amazing stuff to see. And even as we're going to take a look at the cartoons, how they're comparing what was happening versus locally. Even there's so many content creators who have done such skits on how the US elections were done and what we see typically in Africa. All right. It wasn't us, police chief says on Gen Z massacre. Oof. That's a very hot potato there. Ruto eyes new window for borrowing spree. It's on the splash of Daily Nation. We'll be coming to that. Business Daily talks about
The private sector pay falls for first time in over 30 years. Yeah. Because you've been in the private sector miaka yote.
Not for 30 years though. Okay, so average monthly pay in Kenya's private sector has fallen for the very first time in over 3 decades to 75,781, reflecting the impact of the country's soft economy that has pushed firms to keep a lead on costs. Yeah, so what si ati pesa kuna pesa iko lakini they're holding back. They're not going overboard in paying people. So wanaangalia hivyo wanachungulia. Maybe probably as things improve, if at all they will improve, wanaweza rudisha mkono baadaye.
So that means in an interview, the employer would ask you, okay, how much do you want? And the person who quotes the list would be picked.
Not necessarily. Watakwambia, this is what we are offering for this position. A position which previously would have attracted a lot more in terms of remuneration. That story about Safaricom's great profits features also on the front page of the Business Daily. Ethiopia's beer hits Safaricom as Kenya unit profits grow. So Safaricom will take longer to break even in Ethiopia after depreciation of the Horn of Africa's nation currency beer cut the telecom's operator's net profit amid a thriving Kenyan business. So despite the growing business in terms of numbers in Ethiopia, Safaricom is yet to break even there, but locally it is still the most profitable company in East and Central Africa. And you can be doing badly in one sector, but you're still the best. Yeah? Kudos to Safaricom. Okay, that's the Business Daily.
It's a sister paper, Daily Nation. The splash says loans. Members of Parliament give Ruto blank check. They have that on pages 4 and 5. In context, they say the government is seeking a free hand to continue borrowing beyond the legal debt ceiling of 55% of the gross domestic product, the GDP. As part of new proposals sponsored by National Assembly Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah, the National Treasury has proposed extension of coming into force of the debt threshold as a percentage of the GDP to beyond 2028. And just to give you more context on that, the Central Bank of Kenya data that is now on page 4 here shows that the public debt stood at 10.6 trillion Kenyan shillings as of June 2024, compared to 10.3 trillion recorded in June 2023. So this means that you're going to be seeing this number increasing over the next coming years.
Ideally, Parliament would have capped that borrowing to a maximum of 55% of the GDP. But we're already at 70%. So we're already in defiance of that. But they say, okay, fine. Hata hii ilikuwa proposal, it can wait till 2028. For now, there's no ceiling. We're not talking about GDP, a percentage of the GDP. So anaweza enda hata borrow 100% of GDP. Sio mbali sana. Kama tuko 70%.
Ni 30% tu.
So ni 30%. Yeah, tafika hapo.
Other conversations on the front page of Daily Nation. MPs allege evidence tampering in 16.5 billion cash shillings edible oils scam probe. And on the back page, you'll read that the legislators want to know the status of the investigations into the controversial scandal, claiming high-level interference into the inquiry. This development comes following the admission by the Kenya National Trading Corporation that Kenya lost at least 6.5 billion. When you contrast these two stories on the loans and what we are losing from some edible oils scams, sijui unaonaje kama Mkenya. To matters education, state promises to promote primary head teachers. They are, I think, in Mombasa, and they're saying that we want also to be called principals. At least tunataka hii jina head teachers, I give
headmaster.
I give, as Gen Z would say, we want to be called principals. Other conversations, abductions. It's not us, police boss. This is a conversation that all, or rather most dailies in Kenya have gone with. It also talk about Kamala Harris conceding but vows to fight on. And the county crisis as county workers go months without salaries. That's just a nutshell of what is in Daily Nation today.
All right. On the Standard, they talk about abductions puzzle, as police say it wasn't us, and you've seen that in all other dailies. The identity of people behind the recent spate of abductions, which has angered Kenyans and drawn condemnation, was thrown into a spin yesterday after top police bosses led by the IG denied before MPs that police officers had anything to do with it. So what are they saying? Is there another unit that is not part of the police service that was actually doing the abductions?
Yeah.
Yes, because it cannot be the general public just abducting people. It must be some military unit somewhere. Yes. So that's the big question there. Kama sio polisi ni nani?
Nani je?
And what does it mean? What is the fate of those 29 people who are still missing? There's a very disturbing story there on the front page of the Standard today. Sex pest held for filming children. That story is there on page 11 of the Standard. And it's one of those stories you don't like on a Friday.
Yes.
Elsewhere, Raila's AUC chair campaign enters crucial phases, launching officially his campaign in Addis Ababa. All the best to him. Ni kama watu walisahau hii story. What AUC chair, no one is talking about it. So much has happened. The impeachment of the deputy president, US elections, tunafanya KCAC, Safaricom iko na do.
It has been a very busy 2 months of Rigathi Gachagua on the front pages. So now, I think maybe the fact that it's going to be launching, the events that will follow would really speak.
Probably this will return this conversation back to the front pages.
Yes.
Other quick highlights: senators clash with MPs over county billions. Russia's new demand to end attacks on the international front. The Safaricom profits there, and Ateta's vow after losses. Tim Kubwa ile pale. We don't have time. We don't have time.
That's what you're going to go with.
Tuko na gazeti la Taifa Leo hapo tukimalizia.
Kaunti za kauka ndio taarifa kuu pale, wasema hatua ya hazina kuu kuchelewa kutuma mgao wa kaunti ya kuhamisha huduma. Wafanyikazi pale wanachama wa uguzi KNUN wakigoma. Kwingineko pale juu, msanii Princess Julie aagwa kishujaa. Kule Mombasa, magenge yatetemesha Mombasa. Inakonga kero kubwa sana kule. Vijana wanaojihami kwa mapanga wameanza kuwatia hofu wakazi wa mtaa wa Kisauni. Taarifa nyingine ambayo ni muhimu sana kwako kama mpenzi wa ugali au mahindi, kesi za kupinga GMO za tupwa na mahakama. Sema koti yazima kesi zinazopinga hatua ya serikali ya kuondoa marufuku dhidi ya vyakula vya GMO.
Kwa hivyo GMO sasa itakuwa halali.
Halali.
Hiyo
ni Taifa Leo hii.
Ni siku 47 tu kabla ya Christmas. So GMO ndio utakuwa unakula mlo wako wa Christmas. Tuangazie masuala ya karakacha sasa. The cartoons, we start off with the one on the Standard, and he talks about this guy with a plaque with his name Abrake. We know who that is.
Yes.
But there's a very big elephant standing right next to him. The elephant in the room.
Yes.
Is the abductions. He was the CS Interior when these abductions happened. So yesterday, when he officially took over the office of the deputy president, the annex, he crossed the road to the Harambee annex. So he called a press conference. One journalist akamuuliza, so ukiwa CS, hii mambo ya abductions ili happen, what do you have to say about it? Kasema, the politics of my elevation is now behind us. I'll focus on my new role. Your story tumemaliza. Behind. What is behind? The politics of my elevation is now behind. Behind him is a big elephant, the abduction. Sio mimi nimesema, ni the cartoonist on the Standard.
Gamzo amesema.
Siseme, Freddy amesema, cartoonist.
Meanwhile, congratulations. This is People Daily's cartoon, and they have Donald Trump celebrating his win as the #1 there, but they have a begging bowl, and the hand is Africa, and Africa telling him congratulations.
So the only reason we're telling him congratulations is
so that
what are we getting it?
Asante manze.
Asante. Once again, sio sisi tumesema?
Mr. Anole
wa gazeti. Finally, the Daily Nation, and this is what you're talking about.
Yes.
So the contrast between how elections are conducted in the United States and what we are so used to seeing locally. So kuna acceptance speeches elsewhere. It was record. You know, there were close to 200 million voters. But within 24 hours, the results were out. They even had declared the president. We are only about 12 million voters in Kenya.
But it takes
14 million who voted.
It takes
another one a whole month.
A whole month, choirs to be
no there. Concession speech.
Yes.
Vita tu hapa jamaa ameshika fandili wanaitana mwizi, you stole. Wanaasha moto, wanavunja madirisha. That is locally.
Yes.
Something to learn from the US election. We don't have to agree. We don't always have to agree. And it's not always that my candidate has to win. Hata ukishinda, when in Kenya pia, you can continue.
I'm seeing Mozambique is also getting into all this.
Same thing. Tear gas inatamba huko sana, Msumbiji. Hawajafurahia matokeo ya uchaguzi.
Yes.
That's a cartoon on the Daily Nation. So we'll be looking at some of these headlines and the cartoons and what is represented in these stories with my panelists after the break. Do stand by for that conversation. So this is something we were talking about earlier. Feel Good Friday.
Oui. C'est hata French imepotea.
Yes. Tu parles français?
Oui, je parle français. Oui. Top Classic Band will be right here, so it's going to be a whole kind of a Rumba edition. So jitayarishe for all that. The whole Feel Good Friday. Anza kutuambia request zako. 22047 is our SMS number. 0793-267-279 ndio namba yetu ya WhatsApp. Weka remote hapo chini. Tuangalie traffic.
Do we have time for traffic?
Tunaweza angalia tuambie watu leo Friday.
Quick one. Friday traffic.
Yes.
Tuangalie tu kama pale Pangani ina build up sahi because it's 6:33
and particularly with this rains.
Yes.
It tends to build up.
Yes. Normal Friday traffic pale kawaida kwa hiyo interchange, but you can see after that both Murang'a Road and Forest Road are looking good. So the only bit that's problematic ni ile kawaida pale Pangani interchange, the bottleneck ya kawaida. Ile ingine ya kawaida inakuanga na shida ni Jogoo Road, but it's looking proper today. Makadara pale slow down kidogo, lakini after that it's smooth all the way into town. Even when you get into town ile shida inakuanga hapa Haile Selassie Avenue sio kubwa sana leo. I think mvua imefanya watu wakatulia kidogo. Holiday travel around here, easy coach. Ukienda kwa matatu bus station, a bit of traffic there, but it's normal traffic for a Friday. Okay, pale Nyayo Stadium, a bit of a slowdown there. This is a bit unusual because usually it's green here because we are just looking at the expressway.
Yes.
But it would appear there's a bit of a problem there. So if you're approaching town, do expect some slow traffic around Nyayo Stadium roundabout there. Langata Road looking good. Mbagathi Way 2, Ngong Road, nothing much to report there. And also this other part, Wayaki Way.
Yes.
Wayaki Way all the way down into town, it's flowing smoothly. So that's the traffic situation this Friday morning.
Oh yes, definitely. Weka remote hapo chini. We'll be back for State of the Nation, taking a look at quite a number of events that have been happening. Don't go too far.
Vile unavyojua watoto wengi sana hawana namna. Mimi ningependelea watoto wasome.
I'm here to stress on education. At the same time, let us actually do any kind of sport that we are doing. Sport speaks the best language to everybody.
Tunataka tutafute talents. Zile raw talents kutoka kule nyumbani mashinani mahali tuko leo.
Hizi mbio za Chepsaita, like all other sports, zinaleta watu pamoja.
We want to use this event to uplift the lives of the community.
Anafurahia hii mchezo sana. Hata sikaange naambianga watu tuende Chepsaita.
Wanafunzi wakimbie ili wakuze talanta ya mbio ama kuhimiza tena elimu.
This is the place to be. Hapa ndipo mahali wanastahili kuwa tarehe 7. Wale watoto walikimbia last year, wamekimbia mpaka wamefuka mipaka zetu za Kenya.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism, how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m. The Grind, where business meets brilliance. It's not just about the ideas.
I was working as a shampoo boy. I used to wash clients' hair on the sink.
It's about making them happen. From big wins.
In primary school, when we would be asked what people want to be, I was categorical that I want to be a nurse.
To hard lessons.
The consoles change, the gaming equipment keep changing.
We cover it all. Tune in to The Grind, where every episode is packed with insights.
The person who is serving customers, always be a customer-centric.
Strategies.
When you pay attention to detail, you get luxury items.
And stories to fuel your ambition. Don't just dream it, grind it. Mondays at 7:30 p.m.
Experience to ignite your soul. You do not want to miss out.
All right, welcome back. Good morning once again. This is the Morning Cafe on TV47. My name is Fred Indemoli. Time for us to take a look at the state of the nation, and that's simply a look at the big headlines today. A lot of stories, different stories. The Daily Nation has chosen to go with matters debt, loans, MPs give Ruto blank check. That's the front page of the Daily Nation. People Daily still talking about what happened in the US, how Trump victory will affect you. It is still a big discussion. The Standard goes with abductions, puzzle as police say it wasn't us. Na kwenye gazeti la Taifa Leo, kaunti za kauka, hatua ya zinakuu kuchelewa kutuma pesa mgao wa kaunti ya kuhamisha huduma. Now these are just some of the conversations we want to have with my panelists this morning. Allow me to introduce them. On my immediate right, Josephat Kamanya, political analyst. Karibu sana. Next to Bwana Kamanya, we have Fwamba NC Fwamba. And he's a new face on this panel, Morning Cafe. Karibu sana, it's a pleasure to have you in studio.
Morning, Fred.
Bwana Fwamba is a governance analyst and also a politician. Karibu. Wanja Maina, also a familiar face on this panel, the founder of the Hummingbird Grassroots Center. Karibu sana, Wanja.
Thank you, Fred.
So let's start with the biggest discussion this week, and it has been the US elections. Trump finally won, and he becomes the 47th President of the United States. The big question has been, how do issues change for Africa and especially Kenya? That's a big question everyone is asking. What difference are we going to see? Some people say it shouldn't matter, but really, does it go like that, Kamanya?
Well, very good morning to our viewers, Fred. And perhaps a polite reminder to Kenyans that the rains are here. So all our road users, let's be safe and share the road. Yeah, drivers, riders, indicate wisely, and pedestrians, stay safe. And first of all, it's just congratulations to the President-elect of the United States, Trump. And I think he has about 74 days there about to assume office in January. Hence the looming question on when he assumes office, what becomes of the rest of the relations, more so bilateral relations and multilateral relations with the former regime of, or the outgoing regime of Joe Biden had made, and Kenya being one of them. So what becomes of those relations? I think there is a lot to expect, because Trump seems to have a radical agenda on self-preservation of his own country. I believe, as every leader should, you know. And he's been very clear during his campaign on some of the key things he wants to lean on. One is the illegal immigration, because we saw, you know, what was happening in the last wave. The other one is to end wars, because remember, we have about 50 areas of conflict. And I think almost all of them, the United States is involved in one way or the other. We have the Myanmar region, which has gone unaddressed for a long time. We have what is happening in the Palestine and Israel. Up here in our neighbors, Sudan, you know, there are a lot of conflict areas, and Trump has been very vocal in saying he's going to end the wars. That he's going to finish the job that he had started. So we need to see what is going to happen. And for us, Kenya, remember there is the concern about the Haiti mission that we have assumed. So the question is that, was that a multilateral agreement or a bilateral agreement? So if it was just and remember again, Trump does not hold much regard for the NATO organization.
Even the UN.
Even the UN itself. So there is a lot of wait and see, because he's quite radical, and I think that's what we need, because again, there has been a lot of domineering from the US in this last Joe Biden's regime, whereby a lot of people in the world have felt like the US has been making a lot of wrong, regressive decisions. We have the war in Ukraine and Russia. The US is said to have a huge hand on that. It is said Trump and Putin, their buddies. So we are going to see. Yet it's the US who has been supplying the Ukraine with a lot of ammunition. So I think we wait and see. But for Kenya, I would just hope that we will be able to also prioritize our interests moving forward in engaging with any upcoming or incoming president, regardless of the country they're in. Because we are, you know, we are a sovereign country, and we should put our interests first.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm looking at this story on the People Daily, and it talks about how in 2018, President Uhuru Kenyatta then met with the President Trump. He was still president. And in Washington, they agreed on to negotiate a trade pact between the two countries. The trade agreement was described as a comprehensive, high-standard agreement that would serve as a model for future agreements between the two countries. 2 years later, he was bundled out of office, and the new administration froze those negotiations. So now he is back. Wanafomba, do you really expect that things will be positive for Kenya, seeing that our president, this current administration has been very close, or rather has been very cordial with the outgoing administration of Joe Biden?
First of all, I think President Trump's election was so much centered on his idea of being inward-looking in terms of American interests than anything else. So I believe, as he takes back the position he used to have, there's that aspect of continuity from where he stopped. And again, there's also that constant aspect of American interests. For as long as American interests will be in line with the treaties that he signed in advance before being voted out in 2020, there's a very high likelihood that that partnership will continue. Again, those are other agreements that have happened between especially our country and the Biden administration, are likely to go on based on the fact that they are centered on mutual interests of America and Kenya. Therefore, I'm not seeing a lot of change in terms of interest, except on the aspects of donor financing. For example, you look at the non-governmental organizations rely so much on American aid. And under the Republican conditions, the evangelicals do not subscribe to the aspect of like the so-called LGBTQ and the so-called reproductive rights that are so much at the center of the Democrats' campaigns and agitation across the globe. So there's a very high likelihood that the conditions of engagement in terms of donor aid or what is called bilateral engagements will be different from what the Biden administration was having.
Okay. And Wanja, if we focus on that issues of donor funding through NGOs especially, the conversations, some of the conversations do trickle down to our situation here. Issues to do with women's reproductive rights. That could suffer. It has been one of the biggest discussions during the campaigns in the US and between the Republicans and the Democrats. And the Republicans are very conservative when it comes to those issues. Does it mean that the programs being carried out by NGOs locally now might just change?
Thank you so much, Fred, and good morning to our viewers. No doubt that when you look at the Democrats and the Republicans, one of the distinctive feature, I would say, in the two political, institutions is just the whole outlook on human rights, because the Democrats are generally perceived to be welcoming. These are people, these are the human rights, while Donald Trump is more or less on the self-preservation. He's a nationalist. Why should a lot of people cross through the borders to come to our country and take away our jobs and our opportunity? You all remember the famous wall that he was talking about. No doubt that when it comes to issues of women's rights, sexual reproductive health, access to important commodities like family planning, those are really the emerging issues. However, it's not all doom and gloom, because there has been conversations even around Africa. If you saw the speed in which the African countries and African presidents were congratulating Trump, there has been a general observation that African countries actually do better when Republicans are in office. Take an example of the PEPFAR, which was a big thing by George W. Bush that revolutionized health, and particularly how people who live positively with HIV, access to commodities, access to critical drugs and nutrition products. So then it's really, as much as people are projecting the fear that the Republicans, based on the public utterances of Trump, who has often been very condescending towards Africans and immigrants. During his campaigns, he talked about some people eating the dogs and eating the cats, as if to just show that when black people and immigrants go to communities, they are just chaotic and cause a menace. There are other concerns really, particularly on women-owned businesses. There was the famous AGOA, which is actually, opportunities for growth, where specific commodities that are taken to America by African countries are not taxed. So, one would argue, it has revolutionized money in the pockets of women. Trump had said earlier that AGOA will not be renewed by 2025. So I wonder how that plays out. But overall, for me, when I was looking at the American elections, and these are registered voters, around 160 million voters. And I was just, sort of making a, compare and contrast with how we do our things in Kenya. Whereas in America, you could tell there are people who are voting through technology, early voting. There were Americans in diaspora who are voting. And the efficiency for me, you could tell that within maybe 24 hours, we already saw the direction. For those of us for those who don't understand the intricacies, would only sit and wait, as they say, that it's too close to call. And for us, we are still struggling with how we do our elections. And yet, like in the last election, we had around 14 million people participating. That tells you that we need to embrace technology, we need to do this and that. But no doubt when you look at the issue of women and, NGOs and human rights, some people argue that Trump has denied America 2 women presidents because he's the one who came in when Hillary was vying and then Kamala Harris. And for those of us who are fascinated by American politics, some of us feel like the Democrats really need to also change tact. There are some people who feel like there was a lot of the shadow of Obama, the shadow of Hillary Clinton, and their stooges. Probably they couldn't read the signs of the signs of the times, and probably, you know, an invitation for them to look inwards and ask themselves why they have not done well. But this Biden's presidency has also had its fair share of challenges. You know, Kamala was not the original choice of the Democrats. It's just that people say Joe Biden, his health, and what have you. So it has had its fair share, yeah.
And Wenja pointed out the issue of the fact that quite a number of African heads of states were very quick to congratulate, with some very long messages on social media to congratulate President Trump. But the portrayal on the cartoon on the People Daily, if my director can put it up, is the fact that we are doing so simply as a way to stretch our begging bowl. That Africa is simply congratulating the president so that he can look at us favorably, because we are still beggars and we are still dependent on that. Is this portrayal accurate?
Very. I think it's quite spot on. But again, what choice do we have as Africa? Not just African countries, but even as leaders of the world or any other country. You see, we must respect the decision that the Americans have made. We also have to appreciate that America is a major player in the global arena. You know, like Wanja has alluded to, a lot of issues from donations and national, global policies around women and, you know, industry and female industrialization, commerce. All these things, there is what we call political alliances. We don't have to agree on every agenda. That's why we have to look at the mutual interest. So we all know that Africa has a lot of interest in America, and America has a lot of interest in Africa, which we continue again to question and see what leans on exploitation, what leans on adaptation as we advance. Because on one end, as Africa, we need to redefine ourselves. We have engaged in a lot of westernization in the name of civilization. And there is an erosion of culture, erosion of trade, exploitation of our resources to the detriment of Africans. But at this point in time, regardless of whom would have become president, we would have had to align ourselves with that, because that's the leader of that country.
It's a portrayal of us as beggars that I'm more concerned about, that this doesn't seem to change. President after president, we're still going there to beg.
You see, that's the catch-22 we are in, because in Africa you realize most of our leaders really are not willing to take the radical option like we have begun to see in the western part of Africa, where they've sent out the French. Now we are not willing to let out the Brits and the Americans. So we continue begging. It is upon us to decide what kind of leaders we want as Africa to represent us. Remember, when our president was sworn in, and there was around the African meeting, African Union meeting, and all the Africans were invited. I think it was also to the swearing in of the king, or the crowning of the king. They tried to speak to, we are invited as African countries, African leaders, only to be given a platform to sit and listen, or just to have a few of us make a presentation of 5-7 minutes. Yet we are discussing matters Africa in a foreign country, and they did not have enough time to execute their agenda, which should be a developmental agenda. That still has not happened. It would have been upon the African leaders to take up that cue from that conversation and now start changing the terms of engagement with any foreign agency, because any other country is a foreign agency when they come to Kenya or to Africa in general. We must get out of this begging syndrome. We must realize the value that we have as a continent, and start to unionize or unify or modernize our engagement with all the other relevant and global players.
Okay.
Yes.
Over the past few years, we've seen the kind of interaction between Africa as a continent and some of these big economies, including China, Russia, we've seen the BRICS, and now the US. And there's what appears to be a new scramble for Africa with the realignments, especially in West Africa. The US has always been keen, especially under the Democratic administration, been keen to make inroads in Africa and to compete against the Chinese. But Donald Trump has always been a reluctant participant, especially on matters Africa. Do you see that changing? Do you think that probably now China could take advantage of a Republican Trump presidency to make better and more inroads in this continent?
First of all, I want to go back to the so-called congratulatory messages. Every time someone wins, there's always that room for all heads of state to congratulate the person who has won. Therefore, that is not out of the normal. And the coming in of Trump is an expectation from Africa, a legitimate expectation, because from where I stand, we know there is no such thing as free lunch. So whoever comes into office, you engage with him according to his policies and according to your interests. And therefore, even when the Africans are getting ready for the Trump presidency for the second time, it's also advantageous, like you've mentioned, that the BRICS aspect, the Chinese, the alliance with India, Brazil, that kind of arrangement is a good arrangement for Africa because it provides some kind of competition so that America does not feel so much entitled when dealing with Africa. So it will be an opportunity for a symbiotic arrangement for either party to engage with the African countries. Then there's this other aspect that causes Africans to celebrate, because under whatever circumstances, whether the Republicans won or the Democrats won, there is need to look for the advantage that you can get in. For example, Uganda had been denied aid because of the conditionalities relating to the so-called LGBTQ. Now, they must be celebrating, and they have a right to celebrate, because immediately Trump got into office, it's obvious that everything that they got denied is going to be given in fact of in space of friendship between Uganda and America. And that's applicable to so many other African countries, because culturally there is more commonality between our culture and that of the conservatives that represent the Republican Party of the United States.
All right. Do you agree with that assessment that at least now probably in as far as culture is concerned, that a few things might change? There's extreme cultures, the cultures that we share, like reproductive health. It's a very big topic even in Kenya as well. So how do we get that balance?
You know, with the people have said that he who pays the piper calls the tunes. And sometimes, even in a table of negotiation, it depends on how strategic you are and how you present yourself. It reminds me of our minister, of the CS of Finance, who was lamenting, I think 2 days ago, because of how they were told to line in the corridor waiting to be invited. And he was talking in reference to the IMF and some of these Bretton Woods and these international financial institutions. Why I mention those institutions, it is because when we talk about the West and we talk about, money and debt restructuring, we are talking about how Africa is perceived. We have seen that, the interest rates really high and obnoxious because African countries are perceived to be high risk. Probably they think we will default. And their fears sometimes are legitimate because of our political, we are always very political. But then again, I am foreseeing, instances where African countries are also trying to look elsewhere. I particularly remember when Uhuru Kenyatta was in government, when he talked about looking east. You have options. You have mentioned about the BRICS, Fred. If you look at the BRICS, they started as around 6 countries. And when they last had their conference in South Africa, there were around 15 countries that were in the pipeline to join. We are talking about the Irans of this world. We are talking about, I want to believe Ethiopia.
Now, if you look, has joined BRICS.
Ethiopia has joined.
Uganda too.
Uganda has joined. And Kenya probably, in our usual, probably trying to sit in the fence. Who knows, about our foreign policy. But that said, the BRICS, even besides the countries and the names, I'm looking at the population. We are talking about China, we are talking about India. Those are countries whose population is in billions. So I'm foreseeing a very big economic bloc where we are saying we are opposed to the dollarization of the global economy. We are opposed to so many conditional grants. We are opposed to people imposing on us. Because you see, if a country like Kenya will talk about who they want to trade with, we do not want, you know, I would imagine as a country, we want to trade with the one who is good for us. We don't want to be roped into the differences between America and China about who is taking whose share in the global economy. But on a very light note, it seems like even as a country, Kenya, we are starting to look elsewhere. Adani is an Indian company. I mean, if you are giving such a company to an Indian company, and we are talking about millions and surrendering your strategic infrastructure like an airport, probably even Kenya now they're starting to look elsewhere. Okay. But really, you know, that said, African countries, I think time is coming now where they really have to think about how they engage with the world. There has been developments like Kenya joining the Human Rights Council in the UN. Obviously, African countries, you know, refuse to be pushing back, you know, saying you can't put all of us in a bus when we go to the conference. So I think a lot is awaiting.
All right. So yes, a lot of questions on what will happen and what exactly does it mean for Africa and for Kenya in particular with a Trump presidency. He's been president before, so he was the 45th president of the United States. We had a taste of that, and should we expect the same or more of the same? Well, we want to switch gears. I don't know if we're having a break now. Yes, let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll move on to another discussion. That's a big headline on the front page of the Daily Nation, and that has to do with debt in Kenya. You're watching Morning Cafe.
Vile unavyojua watoto wengi sana hawana namna. Mimi ningependelea watoto wasome.
I met the stress on education. At the same time, let us actually do any kind of sport that we are doing. Sport speaks the best language to everybody.
Tunataka tutafute talents. Zile raw talents kutoka kule nyumbani mashinani mahali tuko leo.
Hizi mbio za Chepsaita, like all other sports, zinaleta watu pamoja.
We want to use this event to uplift the lives of the community.
Anafurahia hii mchezo sana. Hata sikaange naambianga watu tuende Chepsaita.
Wanafunzi wakimbie ili wakuze talanta ya mbio ama kuhimiza tena elimu.
This is the place to be. Hapa ndipo mahali wanastahili kuwa tarehe 7. Wale watoto walikimbia last year, wamekimbia mpaka wamefuka mipaka zetu za Kenya.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism, how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m. The Grind, where business meets brilliance. It's not just about the ideas.
I was working as a shampoo.
Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwako na Wizara ya Kawi na Petroli na washirika wenza.
Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Cafe on TV 47 with me, Freddy Ndimuli. We continue looking at the headlines with Josephat Kamanya, Fwamba, NC Fwamba, and Wanja Maina. And now I want us to move to the big headline on the front page of the Standard, and it reads, Abductions Puzzle, as police say it wasn't us. So the identity of people behind the recent spate of abductions, which has angered Kenyans and drawn condemnation, was thrown into a spin yesterday after top police bosses led by the IG of Police, Douglas Kanja, denied before MPs that police officers had anything to do with it. The question now is, so who's behind this brazen wave of injustices on Kenyans? And before we even discuss this, this same story was filed by one of our reporters here at TV 47. Let's watch that story.
6 people have died so far, while 29 others are still missing, according to statistics released by the National Police Service, where 22 individuals have been found alive. The police revealing that there have been a total of 57 cases of kidnapping and abductions that have since been reported countrywide from June 2024.
When IG, before you go there even.
In a response to the Departmental Committee on Administration and Internal Security regarding kidnappings and abductions occurring within the country, the Inspector General of Police Douglas Kanja submitted that already some measures were in place to address the matter. Among them, sensitization of officers on their core values of professionalism while operating within the rule of law.
This bill is going to assist us a lot.
The head of the Blue Boys and Girls hinting on a new bill that will give a guide into investigative procedures, the Criminal Investigations Bill 2024, that seeks to ensure investigative procedures are anchored in law.
As a policing service, as an investigating agency, to be supported such that we can also be able to use technology to enhance our capability in terms of actually investigating and breaking through some of these very, very complicated and complex cases.
Kanja submitting that some of the reported cases of abduction and kidnappings were lawfully in police custody, where in some instances the police were just performing their duties of investigating crimes committed during the Anti-Finance Bill 2024. Former Interior Cabinet Secretary, now Deputy President Kithure Kindiki, also commenting on the issue.
Every other person breaking the law will be dealt with as guided by the law.
Abducting people, and also a framework for accountability of any rogue officer or officers who will be involved. And therefore, that should be the task of the next minister going forward.
Shedding more light into the anti-finance bill protest that commenced on the 18th June and reached its peak on 25th June 2024, figures shared by Kanja indicate that more police officers were injured during the unprecedented events witnessed earlier in the year. According to the police, 495 injuries to police officers were reported, 347 injuries to civilians, 42 fatal injuries to civilians, with at least 1,552 protesters arrested. Moige William, TV47.
So different numbers playing out. According to the KNCHR, it says 60 people were killed during the protests and so many others were abducted. Quite a number are missing, 29. That number appears to differ with the police, but I'm looking at the story here. Police officers were not involved in the abductions, Kanja insists. That's the police IG. Now, this issue has been going on for a while, and the question now would be, if it was not the police, then who? Do we have another paramilitary unit that probably was involved in this?
It's unfortunate, Fred, that the biggest explanation Kenyans have received from our security agencies, led by the IG, is that it wasn't me. You know, should that be enough? And then whom are we to turn to before they can tell us is that it wasn't me? As you rightly ask, if it wasn't the police, then who was it? And then who should investigate those characters? Because it is not an isolated event that somebody was abducted somewhere. There is a series of rampant abduction. And people have gone missing. Some people have come out alive, others hurt, injured, traumatized. Some have confirmed that the persons who were holding them were policemen. But yet, the police come out and say, it wasn't me. You know, I think we have what you would call an internal security crisis, because every Kenyan should feel safe to turn to the police for help. Every Kenyan should feel very safe to go and report any breaking of law. Every Kenyan should have their rights and life protected by the same forces, the police. But if the police are the ones who are saying that the persons who are violating your rights, you know, both the basic rights and the right to life, are not us, we are not the ones arresting and abducting you, then, and they are not offering an explanation that they have realized we have a rogue agency or we have a paramilitary organization in Kenya, then I think we are feeling threatened. We are not safe. And it also begs a lot, and I feel sad to see the Deputy President, Professor Kithure Kindiki, trying to set standards for the incoming CS of internal affairs, interior affairs, because he's the immediate former CS of Interior. All these questions we are raising about abduction and brutal killings of Kenyans have happened under his watch. But he has found a way of assuming a safe distance and saying, I'm only here to offer, you know, it's about policy, I'm not operational, I was there in a strategic capacity. That is very sad, because that's not what I expected of him. I saw him yesterday struggle to really engage Kenyans on a speech. But that's a story for another time as we proceed. But more so, we have to have our security agencies really taking charge and executing the mandate of offering safety and security accordingly. Yes. We do not have to have this sad scenario whereby the same government that is violating some rights, including the right to picket, is the one that deploys police. They arrest you, they abduct you, you don't appear for days on end, and then when you come and the same police comes and says it wasn't me. It wasn't me was not a sufficient answer from IG Kanja.
The IG says, Bonafamba, that some of that which we call abduction was simply lawful arrest of criminals who are engaging in some crime. But there's a difference between how a person is arrested in Kenya and the issue of abduction and being held in Communicado for days on end, some up to 30 days. Meanwhile, the requirement is that if you're arrested, you have to be produced in court in at least 48 hours. So could it just be a matter of semantics? We're talking about the same thing, but everyone has their own meaning of arrest.
Well, one of the key commitments President Ruto made when he got elected was an end to extrajudicial killings and forced disappearances. And I want to believe that that's still the mantra that runs within the government. So yesterday, I saw the Deputy President talking about the abductions, and he was like not in the picture of what had been happening. And therefore, I look upon the DCI to take up responsibility and find in detail find out where exactly and how exactly these things are happening. Because remember, a few days to elections, there are 2 Indian nationals who disappeared, and the president was so mad about it. He even ended up disbanding what was called the Special Service Unit of the DCI. So could there be any other organization doing the same thing without the knowledge of the government, or without the knowledge of the senior people in government, or without the knowledge of the police? If there is such an outfit, then it's the responsibility of the police to take up action and ensure that the safety of Kenyans is guaranteed. You talk about the different arrests that have been witnessed and the abductions. Most of these abductions have not been seen on camera. So that's why it's very difficult to pin down someone and say specifically so and so is doing it. But the arrests have been seen and people have been taken to court. We have witnessed that. So on the issue of these abductions, I want to challenge the police themselves to ensure that Kenyans are safe, to ensure that if there is any outfit that is carrying out such kind of abductions, is held responsible. I remember there was a time I met the former police spokesperson, Kiraide, and he told me, those days I was in activism, and we were asking about some aspects of extrajudicial killings. Then he told us that by virtue of someone being in a police uniform does not necessarily mean he's a police officer if he's carrying out criminal activities. So if there are any criminal elements within the police force, it's the responsibility of the police to pursue those criminal elements and hold them responsible and accountable and take them to justice so that Kenyans also feel secure.
Wanja, it feels like no one is willing to take responsibility. We saw the resignation of the police IG, Japhet Koome, still linked to this. But after that, the CS Interior appears to, who's now Deputy President, appears to say, it wasn't me. The police IG, Douglas Kanja, comes out and says it wasn't us. And these are the main people tasked with the security of this nation. So who, and when Kamanya asked the question, who do we turn to if those two cannot guarantee us any security?
It wasn't us, it wasn't me. I believe there's a song, a hip hop song, it wasn't me. I don't know what that musician had done, but it wasn't him. Speaking of, when I saw the police boss Kanja talking, in his statistics, more police were injured than the Wananchi. And then I was asking myself, the ratio of one Kenyan to the policemen and women is for every 470 Kenyans, there is one policeman, the ratio. Now you ask yourself, if we use that probability and I throw a stone, the chances of hitting a Mwananchi are higher than hitting a police. So when he says that more policemen and women were injured compared to the normal Wananchi, that does not particularly look statistically correct, and that probability just doesn't look like it. So for me, when he was presenting those figures, for me it was more saying that actually we the police are the aggressed and not the aggressors. That's what those numbers meant for me. But you now start asking yourself, is it that generally there is a whole new policy in the government that we have not been told of shrinking the civic space, of suppressing dissent? Because these things are interrelated. You see people who are mostly abducted are those who are very active, the Gen Zs online. You see someone like Alfred Ketel, who was abducted and Kenyans recorded, who is a former MP. You see Boniface Mangi, who was abducted the other Sunday and he was trending on social media. The people who are abducted, there is a pattern. It is not a random abduction. It is mostly people who are voicing dissent and criticizing the government. And yet we are allowed to criticize. Now, when we talk about these police actions, we also now see a member of parliament allied to the government introducing a law to regulate Article 37, which is about people participating in picketing and what have you. And then at the same time, the other day when we were here, one of the leading dailies writes a big investigative journalism piece that the leading telcos and the leading communication companies are sharing our data with the abductors and with the rogue police, if we were to use that phrase. So it seems like these are not just isolated cases. It is just ways of shrinking the civic space. And now separately we had talked about one of the leading telcos that has made a lot of profit, and we saw it. That same telco, if you look at the statistic, it has the largest market share of the Kenyans, around 70%. Then you ask yourself, even as we talk about these profits, even as we talk about, you know, who is making more money, in my view, I think to whom much is given, much is expected. If the Kenyans, if the journalists are saying, doing their investigative and, you know, working with whistleblowers, and they say you are giving our data, if the Gen Zs are saying that during the protest, your company slowed the internet, which was suspicious, I think those are major issues that should be addressed, because even the private companies, the telcos, these private sector people, they cannot be seen to be aiding and abetting the operation of